Hello, and welcome back to the Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Podcast. This is Penny Sansevere.
And Amy Cornell.
And we just hit Amy's 15-year anniversary. Oh my gosh.
Crazy.
We've been working together for 15 years. We have stories, people. If you ever see us, if you ever run into us at a writer's conference, we will tell all our stories for a drink. We're pretty cheap dates, but
that's true.
Yeah, it's been a great 15 years. We have both learned and grown so much, and it's a really fun industry to work in. And the topic today, especially that we're going to talk about, is, it's just another big change in the industry that I think, and that's one of the reasons why I love doing this podcast, because we get to talk about the realistic view, like the Amazon translation tool, which, on its face sounds fabulous. Like, oh my gosh, now I can get all my books translated. And so we really, show was actually Amy's idea, wanted to break down what it is, does it make sense, the good news, bad news kind of thing, because Amazon is always a little bit of good news, bad news, right?
Every time.
every single time. Want to remind y'all, we love your to get your show ideas. We've gotten a few of those. We really love that. Show feedback and questions, any publishing questions that you have. Text the word podcast to 888-402-8940. So Amy, since the show was your idea, would you like to just intro what we're going to talk about? I mean, I know I kind of alluded to it already, but intro kind of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. So Amazon's new translation tool, it sounds very cool. It sounds very much, and I fully appreciate authors are paying attention to what's going on and they want to do anything and everything they can
for sure
to get their books out there. So yeah. I applaud those of you that are trying to keep up with what's changing in the industry and what new opportunities are available, because that's really important too. Doing the same old stuff over and over again doesn't work very well either. So, but actually the reason that this was even fully brought to my attention is that we had an author reach out to us, just potentially that we would work with. And I was checking out, as we've talked about before, I was checking out their Author Central page, checking out their book pages, things like that, just getting a feel for what they had going on already. And I had noticed that his Author Central was flooded with books in different languages. And I was intrigued. And so I asked him about it. I said, what's going on here? What's the plan? All these things. And that's when I was alerted to this is apparently out in beta and some authors have access to it. Some authors don't. But he said, I saw it. I used it. I basically am running and he's a series author. He's like, I'm running all my books through this translation option. And so that's why I've got all these new books now. And so that's when I reached out to you and I was like, we should talk about this because, he was just on board right away. But of course, anytime we hear that, our little alarm bells go off and we think, I think this is worth a discussion because you should never just jump in feet first without some sort of plan or a full understanding of how something serves you, what some of the drawbacks may be, things to look for, how to prep, So.
Well, and, yeah, exactly. And I think that, Amazon absolutely removed the friction from global publishing with this.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that this friction sometimes protects authors from making bad decisions, which is what we hope to kind of unpack in this podcast. Because translation, the first piece of this is that, and we're going to talk about this too, there are language nuances that an AI is not going to be able to grasp. Okay. And that's, I think, probably one of the, not all translation markets are created equal. Right?
No. And Penny, you know this from personal experience, right? With your family overseas.
Well, yeah. So I spent 10 years in Belgium, my family there, and I speak fluent, but my writing, it leaves a lot to be desired. So like when I have family and we're chatting on WhatsApp or whatever, I will use ChatGPT and I'll write it in English and I'll have it translate. And the English nuances do not translate well to to Dutch nuances. Just full stop. So a lot of times I will have to go in there and just remove some stuff and things like that, right? And so you have to really be careful of, be careful of that. And then there are genres that translate really well internationally. And I know we're going to dig into this more just kind of regionally, but genre, thriller, suspense. In fact, we had an author a number of years ago who sold something like $70,000 worth of their thriller book in Germany, right? Because thrillers do very well in Germany. Thriller suspense does very well in Germany. But romance, fantasy, children's book, personal development, self-help, commercial fiction do well in in international markets. The caveat again being not all translations are created equal, right?
Right. Yes.
What are some of the ones that you've seen, the genres that tend to struggle more though internationally? Like, because I think that when, it was kind of like when Amazon launched the audiobook piece of it, and I actually tried that with a couple of our authors, right? It's like, okay, let's see what this sounds like. And the problem, and maybe that's changed now, I haven't checked it out recently, but the problem with this AI narration of these books is that you don't get the inflection, right? You don't get, again, the nuance. Like I listen to a lot, and you listen to a lot of audiobooks, right? You don't capture that like pivotal moment where maybe the narrator, the live narrator, not the AI narrator, their voice would drop or speed up or slow down or whatever. You don't get that with AI.
Well, right. And the phrasing that is very American that doesn't translate either.
Yes.
We had, when we were in Europe and we had a guide to take us through Normandy and things like that, it was very interesting. And I remember specifically in an email, I'd use the phrase, I'll keep an eye out for it. And he was just flabbergasted by taking your eye out and what this meant.
Right.
I thought that is so funny, but so true. There's so many things that are second nature to us using American English that just, again, those, and not that, people that speak other languages couldn't figure it out, but that is exactly what you don't want readers doing. You don't want your reader sitting there and getting pulled out of the story because something doesn't make sense. We would never do that to them intentionally to your American audiences, right?
Right, exactly.
And so setting it up to be that kind of experience for an international audience just really doesn't make sense. And I wanted to mention too that, I think some of the things that are potentially also dangerous about this, in addition to these nuances, is that it's easy to kind of just click all the things when you're in Amazon. But one of the things that I was reading up on too, Penny, is that you have the option to auto enable this. So any other book that you release, yes, any other book you release just automatically get translated. Currently, they have it in Spanish and German, but there are more languages coming. But so, yes, the automation part of it really scared me too, because again, I think we need to start jumping into what the strategy is behind this and things to consider. But as we continue to chat through this, y'all will notice that, auto anything when it comes to this is dangerous, especially,
Right. And I mean, could you imagine? Because if you had, so I would never translate my books into another language because I know there's no way. There's no way that this will translate properly. Right. And I think that falls into like the genres that struggle more. So books that are humor heavy, because a lot of time, like our humor people in Europe don't, or wherever they just think that's crazy. They don't. And sometimes like I remember when I was traveling over to Belgium and my family, they would have like a comedy show on, I wouldn't get it. I don't know what it means. You know what I mean? Yeah. Culturally specific fiction, obviously, right? Dialogue heavy, contemporary fiction. books that are deeply into pop culture, politics, slang. Yeah, this is not an across the board thing that you really want to, that you really want to do. And so, like, let's take, for example, somebody says, I'm going to translate my book into Spanish and I'm going to hit all the Spanish reading markets. Well, Spain, Mexico, Argentina, Colombia, US, Spanish language readers. Spanish, it's kind of like, again, I just go back to like my Belgian heritage. A lot of times what they say is people in Belgium speak Flemish, right? And people in Holland speak Dutch, and they're essentially the same language. It's kind of like American English and UK English, right? The Queen's English, is that called the Queen's English or something? Anyway, it's very, we say things very differently, and we can understand one another, but nuanced makes a huge difference.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Makes a huge difference. So all right. So next up, what's next up on the list to talk about? Amy, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think we really got to talk about, as if y'all weren't already convinced. Everybody's just like, fine, we won't do it. But
no, and it's not, no, and yeah, and this is really just us kind of like, I think that this will definitely work for some people because book translation, there can be a lot of pitfalls if you do it traditionally in book translation. And we can certainly talk about that if we have the time at the end of the show, because I think that's also worth noting too, if you're doing it the traditional way.
Right. And so what this new feature encourages is translating multiple books at once. So if you have a backlist, Amazon is making it very easy to just apply this across the board. You can expand into multiple languages very quickly. And then obviously I mentioned the auto translation, but the issue with this is you're not actually evaluating demand. And as Penny's mentioned, like this takes out any review process per language. This is not like the audiobook version where you get to go through with a fine-tooth comb. They just handle this for you, which can sound appealing. But again, like everything we've said, very careful. And this is also just producing books without any sort of strategy, which you would never do, hopefully. Anybody listening who's been listening for a while knows that you don't just hammer out books with no plan. And that's essentially what this is doing. You're hammering out books without an actual plan that makes sense based on who those potential readers could be,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I also think that when you have, again, so being smart about, translation. So if you've written a thriller or suspense, yeah, they do well on the German market. And I think it's worth researching where your what markets are going to respond, best to your book.
Right.
But the other piece of this is, and we'll talk about that in a second too, just in terms of, maybe how to go about that research. Translation can also fragment social proof, right? So let's say that you have, 100 reviews on Amazon.com, and then you translate your book into Spanish or German, and then it doesn't translate well. And then on the Spanish site, you have 3 reviews and they're not great, right? 2.5 stars or something. 1 German review, which is not great. What this does is it really drags your entire brand down.
Right. And yes.
Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, 100%, because I was just going to tie this back to the author that reached out to us. And that's one of the reasons I asked some questions, because his were all showing up on his Author Central. And unfortunately, the way Amazon automatically presents your online catalog, it just looked like he had a bunch of books in other languages with no reviews, nothing going on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was my first impression. Obviously, I know to dig. I am there for a very different reason than a shopper is. And so I dug through and I finally found the original versions of his book that were published here in the States. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. What's going? And that's why I asked him for more. But to that point, the first impression was very fragmented. Like you said, Penny, it was just books published, a lot of books published in different languages with 0 reviews. And that's, we talk about that all the time, just in everyday publishing here in the States. Like, you don't want to just keep hammering out books without a plan to get them out there, to get them seen, to get them reviewed, because it looks like nobody's showing up to your party,
Yeah, that's right.
and it's a
Absolutely.
bad way to convert people. I think unfortunately sometimes authors shoot themselves in the foot by being prolific in terms of production, but when they're not following through with promotion, because again, you don't want to look like you've been putting a bunch of books out that nobody cares about, because that's an unfair viewpoint of your work also.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, and the other thing too that I think we actually almost never talk about, and I don't think we've ever done a show on this because there hasn't been anything that sort of necessitated it. But um, traditionally, when authors got book deals in other countries, right? So they whether it was audio translation or just the translation of the book, the covers were revised to match the market in those countries, right? So when you look at a book, so even let's just take the US to the UK, right? So you have a book with a US cover, and then you have a book with the UK cover, right? Because we know in publishing that matters. Different culturally, people respond differently to covers, right? So that's not even so I don't think, I mean, obviously, I don't know. I have to dig into this more, but I would be curious if that is something down the road that Amazon's going to allow. So when you get your book translated, do you have to keep the same cover? Because look, if you're going to do it, you may as well do it right. You may as well do it the way that traditional publishers have always done it, because there is a method to the madness when you're trying to reach global markets. I mean, do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And I think that you really so I think the first piece of this is if we haven't totally killed your buzz, like we haven't totally killed all of your fun on this, validate the demand first. So so look at markets and see if your genre is selling there, right? So I rattled off a few genres that do well, and we also talked about, obviously about ones that don't do well. But I think it's kind of obvious as too, I think that we know books that have gotten big translation deals and things and they typically fall into genre fiction. And then I think it makes sense to start with one book, because as opposed to every single book in your library, and this is super exciting. And I got to tell you, like when the audiobook stuff started this now a couple of years ago, I was like, everybody got really excited, like, oh, we can have audiobooks, which is, now that fast forward to today, when I've listened to hundreds of audiobooks, I don't think that I would listen to an AI narrated audiobook. And maybe I have, and the joke's on me. But you know what I mean? Like, so I think that this is something, the proof of whether or not this actually works well, we really won't know this until it starts to roll out. So I think start with one book.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Start with I mean, would you agree somebody should start with their strongest title?
Yeah, start with your strongest title, start with what makes you look the best, because realistically, when it's sitting next to everything else on your virtual shelf on Amazon, people that want to read either the Spanish or the German or future, you know what I mean? They are going to look at what else you've done. Like, these people don't operate in a bubble. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like they are going to look at what else is there. So you're going to present better if you translate a version of your book that already has traction and proven demand in English speaking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think it's also one of those things, we say it all the time, but it's very true, and we've kind of sprinkled this in throughout the show, that very few people just read all thrillers, right? Or all mysteries or all romance. There are so many subgenres to that people are more interested in. So like, just because you put a book into Spanish or into German does not mean that, oh, great, everybody that speaks Spanish is going to be in my potential buyer market, right? Or everybody that speaks German, or people that are potentially going to buy my book now. This is brilliant. That's not how it works. you know what I mean? You are realistically working with a much smaller pool. It doesn't mean, like Penny said, that it can't be potentially really great for you if you have the right book, if you've proven that the demand is there, you have some sort of marketing plan behind it, even if it's very small scale. You know, again, just because a book is translated, it doesn't turn into the field of dreams. You know, we've said that before too. Just because the book exists doesn't mean people are just going to flood in and buy it. You have to get it out there too.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to get it out there. So you have to plan, you also have to plan strategically. And I would say that running some Amazon ads in the country that you are, that your translated book is launching in
Mm-hmm.
would be a great way. You want to plan something around it. So this is not me, this is not Amy and I on the show saying, okay, we'll plan a trip to Germany if you're going to launch there. No, you don't have.
Although if you can write it off, go for it. I support you.
Now we're giving tax advice. I love it. But truly, I mean, the thing about it is that I know it gets to be, we just did a show on book sales, and I realize that sometimes it gets to be kind of a slog, but and when Amazon opens the doors on this, they're just like, oh my gosh, this is exciting, and we're going to do all the things. Just be strategic about it and make sure that you've planned at least a little something around the launch. Run some, the Amazon ads, frankly, in other countries are going to cost you less anyway. So, spend a couple $100, run some Amazon ads, boost the title, and, kind of see how it does. And if it does well, we want to hear about it. So you want to, definitely text us and let us know how your book is done. And if you've used this, I'd love to know that too, because the other thing that I'm really curious about, and Amy, I know that you've done such a deep dive on this. Do you get to pick, like, how does that work? I mean, I realize now I'm asking you about the mechanics, which you may not know about. Do you get to like review some of their translation? Or is it just this Amazon robot, you throw your book in and it spits it out? Do you know?
Right. You do get to preview it.
Okay.
But I think that's very different than, I mean, for most of us at least, unless you're a native speaker yourself, and this is just a cheaper version of something
Well,
that
how
you
are
can.
you going to know?
Exactly. That's what I'm
Like,
thinking.
wait a
Like,
minute.
okay, I could preview a book in German and be zero help to anybody, you know?
Right.
So, and I think, and the thing is with that too, is that it also, I mean, across the board, from what I can tell, it translates everything. So we're talking about your description as well. Like it just kind of runs with everything for you.
Oh,
So like,
okay.
again, and that's another, I mean, again, we've already discussed how important it is, those nuances and things like that, differences between different languages. So yes, obviously that definitely matters for the book, but so of course it would matter for the description as well, you know?
Yeah. 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 I know it. Yeah. It's going to be interesting to kind of see how this plays out. And I think, as authors, we have to use every tool at our disposal. We have to be open to new tools. We just want to make sure that we're using them smartly and not skipping the strategy. And none of these tools are there to help you skip the line. But certainly, I mean, like I said, we'd love to know if you've used this, if this has been something that's really worked for you, because if it helps to expand your horizons and get you into new markets, I think that's fabulous. Just want to be smart about it.
Right, exactly. Just make sure there's a purpose behind it because like I said, you don't want to start throwing this huge party that nobody's showing up to because it's not sometimes oftentimes actually, you only get that split second first impression
Yeah.
also. And unfortunately, if this is not something that you're able to really oversee and critically assess on your own or without hiring somebody to do a review for you still and think like somebody that's a native speaker, things like that, it can get out of control really quickly. But it does sound cool. Like I love the idea behind it. I love the idea of accessibility, of expanding into different markets. I mean, the inspiration is definitely there, but I think the execution leaves something to desire at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I for sure I do. And I'm going to post some links in the show notes, just some articles that I found, discussions that have happened. So if you're considering exploring this, you definitely want to dive deep into those, and I'll put those into the show notes. But we'd love your feedback. We'd love to know what you think of this episode and all of our episodes. And actually next week, on the topic of getting more exposure for your book, which is always our focus, next week we're going to talk about why you want to launch your book multiple times, which is kind of a cool twist on the book launch topic. Text the word podcast to 888-402-8940. We want to hear from you. And we will see you next week. Bye-bye.